Hi everyone, and welcome to this video on DNA inhibitor antibiotics. In this video, you're going to learn three main drug types. We've got number 1, metronidazole, number 2, rifamycins, and number 3, the quinolones, or more correctly now, the fluoroquinolones. Now, the three main steps we're going to go through with this video. Let's start with step 1. Step 1 is all about selective toxicity. So this is essentially how do we kill bacteria cells without killing our own cells. So we have to be selectively toxic to bacteria without being toxic to human cells. Now, we've already spoken about one difference being the cell wall. So we can use cell wall inhibitors such as penicillins, cephalosporins, and the vancomycin. So we've already done that video. Another thing we can do is inhibit folate production. Bacteria need to generate their folate, whereas we get ours through the diet. So folate inhibitors such as sulfonamides is another example of an antibiotic class. Another one is their ribosomes. Bacteria have different types of ribosomes, so we can inhibit their ribosomes, therefore impacting their protein synthesis, and that's another type of drug for antibiotics. But today we're focusing on DNA. There are three kind of different ways we can target bacteria DNA, therefore inhibit their DNA replications or transcription, therefore killing the bacteria or at least stopping their growth. So there's three kind of ways we can do this. So this leads into step 2, which is the mechanism of action. How do these drugs work to kill the bacteria? The first drug we're going to tackle is metronidazole or flagyl. Now I'll bring out an arrow up here just so we have some more room. So this group of drugs is actually what we call a prodrug, which means when we ingest it, it's not actually activated. So what it will do is it will passively diffuse across into the bacteria, and particularly anaerobic bacteria or anaerobic species. So it affects bacteria, but also protozoa, which are single cell organisms. But it's selective or more selective for anaerobic. So this is bacteria or protozoa that likes to live without oxygen. Now this prodrug will cross passively into the cell where it's reduced. So electrons are transferred. So I'll say it is a reduction chemical reaction. And in that chemical reaction, so exchanging electrons, it creates free radicals. And the free radicals then start to break down the DNA. So it impacts the integrity of the DNA within the species, the bacteria or the protozoa. So it will start to break down. So the DNA integrity is impacted. That means the DNA is no longer stable, it can't be read, you can't make proteins, you can't replicate, so that bacteria will die. So it is actually bactericidal. So that's the metronidazole as an example. So that's affecting the integrity of the DNA. Move into rifamycin. Now there are two different types to be aware of for rifamycin. There's rifampin and there's rifbutin. But these are what we call rifamycin species of antibiotics. So what these do differently is they play around with an enzyme called RNA polymerase. Now humans do have RNA polymerase. This is an enzyme that kind of fits within the DNA to be read, and what it does is it kind of produces a byproduct called mRNA, which is the transcription process. So reading the DNA, making a change in script into mRNA, which then can be made into proteins. So we do this in our cells, bacteria do it in their cells, but they have a kind of a specific beta unit. So the RNA polymerase is a group of proteins. One protein is the beta subunit, which is a different shape to the human subunit. So when the drug binds to it, so when the rifamycin binds to it, it kind of blocks that subunit, therefore the RNA polymerase changes its shape and the mRNA can't be spat out the back. So we're not producing mRNA, therefore the bacteria can't kind of make viable proteins and therefore the bacteria die. So the difference here, that was the metronidazole is all about the integrity of the DNA. This is about the RNA polymerase, therefore can't make the proteins or the mRNA. Lastly, we're left with fluoroquinolones. The way you can remember this group is they end with floxacin. such as Cipro, Levo, moxifloxacin. We'll come back to those. Now, what happens here, we know that the DNA within the bacteria is in a circular nature, whereas in humans, it's wrapped up in histones, compacted into chromosomes, arranged within a nucleus, whereas in the bacteria, it's this nice circular DNA. Now, when the bacteria wants to read the DNA to either make proteins or to replicate itself, it has to split it apart. When doing that splitting apart, what it causes is supercoiling. So it kind of stretches it, and downstream and upstream from where you're breaking it apart to read the DNA, it can overwind it, which causes a tension within the DNA, or underwinds it, which can also change the tension within the DNA. Now that can cause damage and breakages, but the bacteria have some enzymes in there called topoisomerase, or there's a whole group of them, topoisomerases. So basically what they do is put little cuts in the DNA to take that tension away and then re-glue it. Now, specifically for the fluoroquinolones, these drugs will block topoisomerase 2 or gyrase and number 4. So specifically blocking those two topoisomerases. So when the bacteria is trying to replicate itself and the topoisomerases put little cuts in there to then re-glue, the fluoroquinolones come in and block those enzymes which stop the gluing back together, which then basically means the bacteria DNA stays in little fragments. That then makes it not viable and the bacteria will die. So these are essentially the three different mechanisms of how the drugs work. One affects the integrity, one affects the RNA polymerase, and one blocks the topoisomerases, which is all about the tension within the DNA. What we can do now is we can move to what clinical cases are these drugs used in, and some considerations that you might see in your patients, so some adverse effects or contraindications to be aware of. The first drug is the metronidazole or the flagyl. What I want you to remember here is Metro. Metro, we know, is a train system and it works underground. So it's usually underground in tunnels and so forth. That means it's in the dark. So these drugs are also in the dark, meaning they're not exposed to the outside world, so there's no oxygen, so they're anaerobic. So they target anaerobic infections. So that's the way you can remember Metro, because metronidazole, okay, underground anaerobic, okay. Another interesting point to think of that sometimes used in textbooks is it's sometimes suggested to work under the diaphragm, which means kind of a lot of infections that are in the abdominal or pelvic cavity. But the first one's an exception. So here I've got kind of a mnemonic, MET, as in metro, and GAP, mind the gap, which we usually get told when we're on the metro. So M starts mouth infection, dental infections. So this is the exception to the diaphragm. But if you have dental infections, abscesses and so forth, these groups of antibiotics can be useful in that case. Then we have entoamoebas. So this would be dysentery caused by a certain protozoa called an amoeba. That can be useful in that case. Then we have Trichomonas vaginalis. This is an STI infection caused by a protozoa. Again, these drugs can be effective in that context. We then have G for Giardia. Giardia is commonly associated with infections in camping, drinking stream water, sometimes known, I think, as beaver fever. That causes quite profuse diarrhea associated with that. So flagyl can be used in that case. Then we have anaerobic bacteria species like C. diff, which is located in the bowel, and then pylori or H. pylori infections, which is commonly associated with ulcers, stomach ulcers. Now, some contraindications or considerations to have. In some individuals, it causes a reaction called a disulfiram interaction, which is an interaction with ingesting alcohol. For those individuals that are susceptible to this, they can get flushing, hypotension, so low blood pressure, fainting, or quite extreme nausea. In some other individuals, they get a metallic taste with this antibiotic, but most commonly certain GI complaints like nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. So that's the metronidazoles. Moving to the rifamycin, some subcategories, as I said, rifampin and rifabutin. most commonly would be used in the context of tuberculosis, but can also be used prophylactically in meningitis, bacterial meningitis. Now, what these drugs will do, they're metabolized in the liver, but they will actually cause the enzyme that they metabolize, cytochrome P450, to speed up in its efficiency. That means other medications that the patient might be taking will actually get broken down quicker, such as warfarin, which is an anticoagulant, so you'll have to check the INR. But individuals with HIV, which are then more prone to TB because they're immune compromised, they might be taking antivirals, and the antivirals are also metabolized by this particular enzyme, so you need to be mindful of those individuals. It's suggested to not use as a monotherapy, which is basically don't use in isolation because bacteria can become resistant to it, so it's usually combined with other antibiotics in the case of tuberculosis treatment. Now, interestingly, the antibiotics are broken down and metabolized into certain products that cause an orange discoloration of fluids like tears, saliva, urine. So sometimes that might be just be mindful as a side effect to educate your patients with. And then finally, with the fluoroquinolones, remember ending with floxacin. So ciprofloxacin, quite commonly used in gram-negative rod infections like pseudomonases, whereas the levo and moxifloxacins seem to be more selective for gram-positive respiratory infections like acquired pneumonia. Some considerations of use, certain cations like calcium, iron, so Fe2, and zinc seems to collate with this medication. So if a patient was to ingest dairy like milk at the same time as taking this medication, the drug and the calcium can combine, or with other supplements like iron or zinc can combine, collate, takes it out of solution, and then they can pass it out without being absorbed. So just be mindful of that. Now, an Achilles heel of this medication literally is it can cause tendinopathies. So it is a risk for, say, sports people who may be putting a lot of stress in their tendons, can cause tendon ruptures. In addition to that, it affects the growth of cartilage, so it's generally contraindicated in children under 18 and in pregnancies. And also the fluoroquinolones can be associated with peripheral neuropathies, particularly in long-term use. So there you have it. We've now done the DNA inhibitor antibiotics. You know how they work, the 3 different types, some of the most common clinical indications, and some considerations, adverse effects, contraindications with this class of antibiotics.
Hi everyone, Dr. Mike here. If you enjoyed this video, please hit like and subscribe. We've got hundreds of others just like this. If you want to contact us, please do so on social media. We are on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Dr. Mike Todorovic, at DrMiketodorovic. Speak to you soon.